Hare Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Visakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Dejatarine. Hare Krishna. Would anyone like to start reading? If anyone wants to kick it off. Fire away, Mahamantra Prabhu. Hari Bol.
Hari. Okay. To concentrate on completing Volume 3, Bhaktivedanta Swami returned to the Radha Damodar temple. These were the last chapters of the first canto, dealing with the advent of the present age of Kali. There were many verses foretelling society's degradation and narrating how the great King Parikshit had staved off Kali's influence by his strong Krishna-conscious rule. In his purports, Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote that government could not check corruption unless it rooted out the 4 basic principles of irreligion: meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. You cannot check all these evils of society simply by statutory acts of police vigilance, but you have to cure the disease of mind by the proper medicine, namely advocating the principles of Brahminical culture, or the principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. We must always remember that false pride, undue attachment for woman or association with them, an intoxicating habit of all, description will cripple the human civilization from the path of factual peace, however the people may go on clamouring for such peace of the world. To raise funds for Volume 3, Bhaktivedanta Swami decided to try Bombay. He travelled there in July and stayed at the Prem Kutir Dharmashala, a free ashram, Srila Prabhupada. At Prem Kutir, they received me very nicely. I was going to sell my books. Some of them were criticising. What kind of sannyasi? He is making business book selling. Not the authorities said this, but some of them. I was writing my book then also. Then I became a guest for 15 days with a member of the Dalmia family. One of the brothers told me that he wanted to construct a little cottage at his house. You can live here. I will give you a nice cottage. I thought, no, it is not good to be fully dependent and patronized by a Vishayi materialist. But I stayed for 15 days and he gave me exclusive use of a typewriter for writing my books. Bhaktivedanta Swami made his rounds of the institutions and booksellers in Bombay. He now had an advertisement showing himself with Prime Minister Shastri and he also had the Prime Minister's letter and the Ministry of Education's purchase order for 50 volumes. Still, he was only getting small orders. Then he decided to visit Sumati Moraji, head of the Scindia Steamship Company. He had heard from his godbrothers in Bombay that she was known for helping sadhus and had donated to the Bombay Gaudiya Math. He had never met her, but he well remembered the 1958 promise by one of her officers to arrange half-fare passage for him to America. Now he wanted her to help for printing Srimad Bhagavatam. But his first attempts to arrange a meeting were unsuccessful. Frustrated at being put off by Mrs. Maharaj's officers, he sat down on the front steps of her office building, determined to catch her attention as she left for the day. The lone sadhu certainly caused some attention as he sat quietly chanting for 5 hours on the steps of the Scindia Steamship Company building. Finally, late that afternoon, Mrs. Maharaji emerged in a flurry of business talk with her secretary, Mr. Chokshi. Upon seeing Bhaktivedanta Swami, she stopped. "Who is this gentleman sitting here?" she asked Mr. Chokshi. "He's been here for 5 hours," the secretary said. "All right, I'll come," she said, and walked up to where Bhaktivedanta Swami was sitting. He smiled and stood, offering namaskars with folded palms. "Swamiji, what can I do for you?" she said. Bhaktivedanta Swami told her briefly of his intentions to print the 3rd volume of his Srimad Bhagavatam. "I want you to help me," he said. "All right," Mrs. Maharaji replied. "We can meet tomorrow because it's getting late. Tomorrow you can come and we will discuss." The next day, Bhaktivedanta Swami met with Mrs. Maharaji in her office, where she looked at the typed manuscript and the published volumes. "All right," she said, "if you want to print it, I will give you the aid. Whatever you want, you can get it printed." With Mrs. Maharaji's guarantee, Bhaktivedanta Swami was free to return to Vrindavan to finish writing the manuscript. As with the previous volumes, he set a demanding schedule for writing and publishing. The 3rd volume would complete the 1st canto. Then, with a supply of impressive literature, he would be ready to go to the West. Even with volumes 1 and 2, he was getting a better reception in India. Already he had seen the Vice President and Prime Minister. He had successfully approached a big business magnate of Bombay, and within a few minutes of presenting the book, he had received a large donation. The books were powerful preaching. Okay, I'll stop at that grey line. That's okay.
Okay. Janmashtami was drawing near, and Bhaktivedanta Swami was planning a celebration at the Radha Damodar temple. He wanted to invite Vishwanath Das, the governor of Uttar Pradesh, to preside over the ceremony honoring Lord Krishna's appearance. Sri Vishwanath had received a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam, Volume 1, and had written a favourable review. Although a politician, he was known for his affection and respect for sadhus. He regularly invited recognized sadhus to his home, and once a year he would visit all the important temples of Mathura and Vrindavan. Bhaktivedanta Swami asked Vrindavan's municipal president, Mangala Sharma, to invite the governor to the Janmashtami celebration at Radha Damodar temple. The governor readily accepted the invitation. Bhaktivedanta Swami printed a flyer announcing, "On the occasion of Janmashtami ceremony at the Samadhi ground of Srila Rupa and Jiva Goswami, Sri Sri Radha Damodar Temple, Sevakund, Vrindavan, Gaudiya Kirtan performances in the presence of His Excellency Sri Vishwanath Das, Governor of Uttar Pradesh, and the chief guest, Sri G.D. Somani of Bombay, Trustee of Sri Ranganathji Temple, Vrindavan. Dated at Vrindavan, Sunday the 31st of August, 1964 at 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. The flyer contained an advertisement for the Srimad Bhagavatam series to be completed in 60 volumes. Bhajans to be sung on the occasion: Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, Nitai Padakamala, the prayers to the 6 Goswamis, and other favourite songs of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas were printed in Bengali as a songbook. The program was successful A large crowd attended and sang songs to Lord Krishna and took prasadam. Bhaktivedanta Swami lectured on a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, describing the age of Kali as an ocean of faults that had but one saving quality, the chanting of Hare Krishna. After leading the Hare Krishna Kirtan, Bhaktivedanta Swami presented a copy of his second volume of Srimad Bhagavatam to the governor and spoke of his plans to preach all over the world. The day after Janmashtami was Bhaktivedanta Swami's 69th birthday. A few days later, Vishwanath requested Swami Maharaj to visit him at his mansion in Lucknow. It was a special occasion, and the governor had invited several sadhus and planned a kirtan program. He had invited a professional musical group who toured India, performing kirtans and giving recitals. One of the musicians, young Shishir Kumar Bhattacharya, was very impressed with Bhaktivedanta Swami. Shishir Bhattacharya. We were invited to perform kirtan in the governor's house in Lucknow. We had about 7 or 8 in our group. This was the governor's house, a big home, and I was sitting on a dais. I saw the governor, Vishwanath Das, and beside him was a sadhu who was old, but I thought was really strong. When I saw the governor sitting there, I came down from the dais and bowed down. Then I asked which subject he wanted to listen to. He said, "Let's have something about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu." Then I said, "I'm very glad you selected this." About 1/2 hour we spent on Mahaprabhu's kirtan, and then we had our dinner in the big banquet hall on all silver plates with the governor's symbols on each of them. We sat together, and I was sitting side by side with the same sadhu, and he introduced himself as Bhaktivedanta Swami. We discussed, and then the Swami presented me with a book, Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktivedanta Swami said, "I am interested to propagate Krishna Nam and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Western countries. I am trying to get some way to find some ticket. If I get, I will go, and I will propagate Mahaprabhu's teachings." And he uttered this verse from Mahaprabhu, Pritivitayachayata Nagaradi Gram, Sarvatra Prachara Habe Moranam. But I did not think he would actually be able to do it, because he was very simple and poor.
With the manuscript for volume 3 complete, and with the money to print it, Bhaktivedanta Swami once again entered the printing world, purchasing paper, correcting proofs, and keeping the printer on schedule so that the book would be finished by January 1965. Thus, by his persistence, he who had almost no money of his own managed to publish his third large hardbound volume within a little more than 2 years. At this rate, with his respect in the scholarly world increasing, he might soon become a recognized figure amongst his countrymen. But he had his vision set on the West, and with the third volume now printed, he felt he was at last prepared. He was 69 and would have to go soon. It had been more than 40 years since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had first asked a young householder in Calcutta to preach Krishna consciousness in the West. At first, it had seemed impossible to Abhay Charan, who had so recently entered family responsibilities. That obstacle, however, had long ago been removed, and for more than 10 years he had been free to travel. But he had been penniless, and still was. And he had wanted first to publish some volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam to take with him. It had seemed necessary if he were to do something solid. Now, by Krishna's grace, 3 volumes were on hand. Srila Prabhupada. I planned that I must go to America. Generally, they go to London, but I did not want to go to London. I was simply thinking how to go to New York. I was scheming whether I shall go this way through Tokyo, Japan, or that way. Which way is cheaper? That was my proposal, and I was targeting to New York always. Sometimes I was dreaming that I have come to New York. Then Bhaktivedanta Swami met Mr. Agarwal, a Mathura businessman, and mentioned to him in passing, as he did to almost everyone he met, that he wanted to go to the West. Although Mr. Agarwal had known Bhaktivedanta Swami for only a few minutes, he volunteered to try to get him a sponsor in America. It was something Mr. Agarwal had done a number of times. When he met the sadhu who mentioned something about going abroad to teach Hindu culture, he would ask his son Gopal, an engineer in Pennsylvania, to send back a sponsorship form. When Mr. Agarwal volunteered to help in this way, Bhaktivedanta Swami urged him, please, to do so. Srila Prabhupada. I did not say anything seriously to Mr. Agarwal, but perhaps he took it very seriously. I asked him, well, why don't you ask your son Gopal to sponsor so that I can go there? I want to preach there. But Bhaktivedanta Swami knew he could not simply dream of going to the West. He needed money. In March 1965, he made another visit to Bombay, attempting to sell his books. Again, he stayed at the free Dharmashala, Prem Kutir. But finding customers was difficult. He met Paramananda Bhagwani, a librarian at Jai Hind College, who purchased books for the college library and then escorted Bhaktivedanta Swami to a few likely outlets. Mr. Bhagwani, I took him to the popular book depot at Grant Road to help him in selling books, but they told us they couldn't stock the books because they don't have much sales on religion. Then we went to another shop nearby, and the owner also regretted his inability to sell the book. Then he went to Sadhu Bela near Mahalakshmi temple, and we met the head of the temple there. He, of course, welcomed us. They have a library of their own, and they stock religious books. So we approached them to please keep a set there in their library. They're a wealthy ashram, and yet he also expressed his inability. Bhaktivedanta Swami returned to Delhi, pursuing the usual avenues of book selling and looking for whatever opportunity might arise. And to his surprise, he was contacted by the Ministry of External Affairs and informed that his no objection certificate for going to the US was ready. Since he had not instigated any proceedings for leaving the country, Bhaktivedanta Swami had to inquire from the ministry about what had happened. They showed him the statutory declaration form signed by Mr. Gopal Agarwal of Butler, Pennsylvania. Mr. Agarwal solemnly declared that he would bear the expenses of Bhaktivedanta Swami during his stay in the US. Srila Prabhupada, whatever the correspondence was there between the father and son, I did not know. I simply asked him, why don't you ask your son Gopal to sponsor? And now, after 3 or 4 months, the no objection certificate was sent from the Indian consulate in New York to me. He had already sponsored my arrival there for 1 month, and all of a sudden I got the paper. At his father's request, Gopal Agarwal had done as he had done for several other sadhus, none of whom had ever gone to America. It was just a formality, something to satisfy his father. Gopal had requested a form from the Indian consulate in New York, obtained a statement from his employer certifying his monthly salary, gotten a letter from his bank showing his balance as of April 1965, and had the form notarized. It had been stamped and approved in New York and sent to Delhi. Now Bhaktivedanta Swami had a sponsor, but he still needed a passport, visa, P-form, and travel fare. The passport was not very difficult to obtain. Krishna Pandit helped, and by June 10th he had his passport. Carefully, he penned in his address at the Radha Krishna temple in Chippiwada and wrote his father's name, Gauram Mohan Dey. He asked Krishna Pandit also to pay for his going abroad, but Krishna Pandit refused, thinking it against Hindu principles for a sadhu to go abroad, and also very expensive. Anyone else wants to go?
With his passport and sponsorship papers, Bhaktivedanta Swami went to Bombay not to sell books or raise funds for printing. He wanted a ticket for America. Again, he tried approaching Srimati Morarji. He showed his sponsorship papers to his secretary, Mr. Choksky. He was impressed and he went to Mrs. Morarji on his behalf. The Swamiji from Vrindavan is back, he told her. He had published his book on your donation. He has a sponsor. He wants to go to America. He wants you to send him on a Scandia ship. Mrs. Morarji said no. The Swamiji was too old to go to the United States and expect to accomplish anything. As Mr. Shotsky conveyed him to Mrs. Morarji's words, Bhaktivedanta Swami listened disapprovingly. She wanted him to stay in India and complete the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why go to the States, finish a job here? But Bhaktivedanta Swami was fixed on going. He told Mr. Choksi that he should convince Mrs. Morarji. He coached Mr. Choksi on what he should say. I found this gentleman very inspired to go to the States and preach something to the people there. But when he told Mrs. Morarji, she again said, no, the Swami was not healthy, it would be too cold there. He might not be able to come back, and she doubted whether he would be able to accomplish much there. People in America were not so cooperative, and they would probably not listen to him. Exasperated with Mr. Trotsky's ineffectiveness, Bhaktivedanta Swami demanded a personal interview. It was granted. A grey-haired, determined Bhaktivedanta Swami presented his emphatic request, please give me one ticket. Srimati Morarji was concerned. Swamiji, you're so old, you are taking this responsibility. Do you think it is all right? No, he reassured her, lifting his hands as if to reassure a doubting daughter. It is all right. But do you know what my secretaries think? They said, Swamiji is going to die there. Bhaktivedanta Swami made a face as if to dismiss a foolish rumor. Again, he insisted that she give him a ticket. All right, she says. Get a P form and I will make arrangements to send you by our ship. Bhaktivedanta Swami smiled brilliantly and happily left her offices, past her amazed and skeptical clerks. A P form, another necessity for an Indian national who wants to leave the country, is a certificate given by the State Bank of India certifying that the person has no excessive debts in India and is cleared by the banks. That would take a while to obtain, and he also did not have a US visa. He needed to pursue the government permission in Bombay, but he had no place to stay. So Mrs. Morarji agreed to let him reside in the Scandia colony, a compound of apartments for employees in the Scandia company. He stayed in a small and furnished apartment with only his trunk and typewriter. The resident Scandia employees all knew that Mrs. Morarji was sending him to the West, and some of them became interested in his cause. They were impressed, for although he was so old, he was going abroad to preach. He was a special sadhu scholar. They heard from him how he was taking hundreds of copies of his books with him, but no money. He became a celebrity at the Scandia colony. Various families brought him rice, sabji, and fruit. They brought so much that he could not eat it all. And he mentioned to Mrs. Chotsky, just accept it and distribute it. Mr. Chotsky advised Bhaktivedanta Swami, then began giving remnants of his food to the children. Some of the older residents gathered to hear him as he read and spoke from Srimad Bhagavatam. Mr. Vasaveda, the chief cashier of the Scandia, was particularly impressed and came regularly to learn from the sadhu. Mr. Vasuvada obtained copies of Bhaktivedanta Swami's books and read them at his home. Bhaktivedanta Swami's apartment shared the roof and veranda with Mr. Nagarajan, a Scandia office worker, and his wife, Mr. Narajan. Every time when I passed that way, he used to be writing or chanting. I would ask him, Swamiji, what are you writing? He used to sit near the window and one after another was translating the Sanskrit. He gave me 2 books and said, child, if you read this book, you will understand. We would have discourses in his house and 4 or 5 Gujarati ladies used to come. At one of these discourses, he told one lady that those who wear their hair parted on the side, that is not a good idea. Every Indian lady should have her hair parted in the center. They were very fond of listening and very keen to hear his discourse. Every day he would go out trying to get his visa and P form as quickly as possible, selling his books and seeking contracts and supporters for his furniture. for his future Srimad Bhagavatam publishing. Mr. Nagarajan tried to help using the telephone directory. He made a list of wealthy businessmen and professional men who were Vaishnavas and might be inclined to assist. Bhaktivedanta Swami's neighbour at the Skandia colony observed him coming home dead tired in the evening. He would sit quietly, perhaps feeling morose. Some neighbours thought, but after a while they would sit up rejuvenated and start writing. Mr. Nagarajan. When he came home, we used to give him courage and we used to tell him, Swamiji, one day you will achieve your target. He would say, time is still not right, time is still not right. They are all ajanis. They don't understand, but I still must carry on. Sometimes I would go by and his chadra would be on his chair, but he would be sitting on the windowsill. I would ask him, Swamiji, do you have any good contacts? He would say, not much today. I didn't get much, and it is depressing. Tomorrow Krishna will give me more details, and he sat there quietly.
After 10 minutes, he would sit in his chair and start writing. I would wonder how Swamiji was so tired in 1 minute and in another minute. Even if he was tired, he was not defeated. He would never speak discouragement. We would always encourage him and say, if today you don't get it, tomorrow you will definitely meet some people, and they will encourage you. And my friends used to come in the morning and in the evening for discourse, and they would give namaskara and fruits. Mr. Nagarajan, his temperament was very adjustable and homely. Our friend would offer a few rupees. He would say, all right, it will help. He used to walk from our colony to Adhiri station. It is 2 kilometers, and he used to go there without taking a bus because he had no money. Bhaktivedanta Swami had a page printed entitled My Mission, and he would show it to an influential man in his attempts to get further financing for Srimad Bhagavatam. The printed statement proposed that God consciousness was the only remedy for the evils of modern materialistic society. Despite scientific advancement and material comforts, there was no peace in the world. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the glory of India, must be spread all over the world. Mrs. Moraji asked Bhaktivedanta Swami if he would read Srimad Bhagavatam to her in the evening. He agreed. She began sending her car for him at 6 o'clock each evening, and they would sit in her garden, where he would recite and comment on the Bhagavatam. Mrs. Moraji, he used to come in the evening and sing the verses in rhythmic tunes, as is usually done with the Bhagavatam, and certain points. When you sit and discuss, you raise so many points. He was commenting on certain points, but it was all from the Bhagavatam. So he used to sit and explain to me and then go. He could give time and I could hear him. That was for about 10 or 15 days. He's backing by the Scindia, and his sponsorship in the US were a strong presentation, and with the help of the people at, is that right?
Yeah.
Gandia, he obtained his visa on July 28, 1965, but the P-form proceedings went slowly and even threatened to be a last insurmountable obstacle. Srila Prabhupada formally there was no restriction for going outside, but for a sannyasi like me, I had so much difficulty obtaining the government permission to go out. I had applied for the P-form sanction, but no sanction was coming. Then I went to the State Bank of India. The officer was Mr. Matachari. He told me, Swamiji, you are sponsored by a private man, so we cannot accept. If you are invited by some institution, then we could consider. Are you invited by a private man for 1 month? And after 1 month, if you are in difficulty, there will be so many obstacles. But I had already prepared everything to go, so I said, what have you done? He said, I have decided not to sanction your people. I said, no, don't do this. You better send me to your superior. It should not be like that. So he took my request and he sent the file to the chief official for foreign exchange, something like that. So he was the supreme man in the State Bank of India. I went to see him. I asked his secretary, do you have such and such a file? You kindly put it to Mr. Ryle. I want to see him. So the secretary agreed. And he put the file and he put my name down to see him. I was waiting. And Mr. Ryle came personally. He said, Swamiji, I passed your case, don't worry. Following Mrs. Moraji's instructions, her secretary, Mr. Coxey, made final arrangements for Bhaktivedanta Swami. Since he had no warm clothes, Mr. Coxey took him to buy a wool jacket and other woolen clothes. Mr. Coxey spent about 250 rupees on new clothes, including some new dhotis, at Bhaktivedanta Swami's request, and Mr. Coxey printed 500 copies of a small pamphlet containing the 8 verses written by Lord Chaitanya and an advancement for Srimad Bhagavatam in the contents of an advertisement for the India Steamship Company. Okay.
Who would like to read? Oh, Brandon, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we can read. We've got Radha Priya here as well.
Haribol, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Mr. Chokshi, I asked him, why couldn't you go earlier? Why do you want to go now to the States at this age? He replied that I will be able to do something good, I am sure. His idea was that someone should be there who would be able to go near people who were lost in life and teach them and tell them what the correct thing is. I asked him so many times, why do you want to go to the States? Why don't you start something in Bombay or Delhi or Vrindavan? I was teasing him also. You're interested in seeing the States, therefore you want to go. All Swamijis want to go to the States, and you want to enjoy there. He said, what I have got to see, I have finished my life. But sometimes he was hot-tempered. He used to get angry at me for the delays. What is this nonsense, he would say. And I would understand. He was getting angry now. Sometimes he would say, oh, Mrs. Moraji has still not signed this paper? She says, come back tomorrow. We will talk tomorrow. What is this? Why this daily going back? He would get angry. Then I would say, you can sit here. But he would say, how long do I have to sit? He would become impatient. Finally, Mrs. Moraji scheduled a place for him on one of her ships, the Jaladuta, which was sailing from Calcutta on August the 13th. She had made certain that he would travel on the ship whose captain understood the needs of a vegetarian and a Brahmin. Mrs. Moraji told the Jaladuta's captain, Arun Pandya, to carry extra vegetables and fruits for the Swami. Mr. Chokshi spent the last 2 days with Bhaktivedanta Swami in Bombay, picking up the pamphlets at the press, purchasing clothes, and driving him to the station to catch the train for Calcutta. He arrived in Calcutta about 2 weeks before the Jaladuta's departure. Although he had lived much of his life in the city, he now had nowhere to stay. It was as he had written in his Vrindavan Bhajan. I have my wife, sons, daughters, grandsons, everything, but I have no money, so they are a fruitless glory. Although in this city he had been so carefully nurtured as a child, those early days were also gone forever. Where have my loving father and mother gone to now? And where are all my elders? Where were my own folk? Who will give me news of them? Tell me who? All that is left of this family life is just a list of names. Out of the hundreds of people in Calcutta whom Bhaktivedanta Swami knew, he chose to call on Mr. Sisir Bhattacharya, the flamboyant kirtan singer who he had met the year before at the governor's house in Lucknow. Mr. Bhattacharya was not a relative, not a disciple, nor even a close friend, but he was willing to help. Bhaktivedanta Swami called at his place and informed him that he would be leaving on a cargo ship in a few days. He needed a place to stay, and he would like to give some lectures. Mr. Bhattacharya immediately began to arrange a few private meetings at friends' homes, where he would sing and Bhaktivedanta Swami would then speak. Mr. Bhattacharya thought the sadhus leaving for America should make an important news story. He accompanied Bhaktivedanta Swami to all the newspapers in Calcutta, the Hindustan Standard, the Amrit Bazar Patrika, the Jagantas, the Statesman, and others. Bhaktivedanta Swami had only one photograph, a passport photo, and they made a few copies for the newspapers. Mr. Bhattacharya would try to explain what the Swami was going to do, and the news writers would listen. But none of them wrote anything. Finally, they visited the Dainak Basumati, a local Bengali daily, which agreed to print a small article with Bhaktivedanta Swami's picture.
A week before his departure on August 6th, Bhaktivedanta Swami travelled to nearby Mayapur to visit the Samadhi of Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. Then he returned to Calcutta, where Mr. Bhattacharya continued to assist him with his final business and speaking engagements. Mr. Bhattacharya: we just took a hired taxi to this place and that place. He would go for preaching. I never liked to talk to him during the preaching, but once when I was coming back from the preaching, I said, "You said this thing about this, but I tell you, it's not this, it's this." I crossed him in something or argued, and he was furious. Whenever we argued and I said, "No, I think it's this," then he was shouting. He was very furious. He said, "You're always saying, I think, I think, I think. What's the importance of what you think? Everything is what you think, but it doesn't matter. It matters what Shastra says. You must follow." I said, "I must do what I think, what I feel. That's important." He said, "No, you should forget this. You should forget your desire. You should change your habit. Better you depend on Shastras. You follow what Shastra wants you to do and do it. I'm not telling you what I think, but I'm repeating what the Shastra says." As the day of his departure approached, Bhaktivedanta Swami took stock of his meager possessions. He had only a suitcase, an umbrella, and a supply of dry cereal. He did not know what he would find to eat in America. Perhaps there would be only meat. If so, he was prepared to live on boiled potatoes and the cereal. His main baggage, several trunks of his books, was being handled separately by Scindia Cargo. 203 volume sets, the very thought of the books gave him confidence. When the day came for him to leave, he needed that confidence. He was making a momentous break with his previous life, and he was dangerously old and not in strong health. He was going to an unknown and probably unwelcoming country. To be poor and unknown in India was one thing. Even in these Kali Yuga days when India's leaders were rejecting Vedic culture and imitating the West, it was still India. It was still the remains of Vedic civilization. He had been able to see millionaires, governors, the prime minister, simply by showing up at their doors and waiting. A sannyasi was respected. The Srimad Bhagavatam was respected. But in America, it would be different. He would be no one, a foreigner. And there was no tradition of sadhus, no temples, no free ashrams. But when he thought of the books he was bringing, transcendental knowledge in English, he became confident. When he met someone in America, he would give him a flyer. Srimad Bhagavatam, India's message of peace and goodwill. It was August 13th, just a few days before Janmashtami, the appearance anniversary day of Lord Krishna. The next day would be his own 69th birthday. During these last years, he had been in Vrindavan for Janmashtami. Many Vrindavan residents would never leave there. They were old and at peace in Vrindavan. Bhaktivedanta Swami was also concerned that he might die away from Vrindavan. That was why all the Vaishnav sadhus and widows had taken vows not to leave, even for Mathura, because to die in Vrindavan was the perfection of life. And the Hindu tradition was that a sannyasi should not cross the ocean and go to the land of the Mlechas. But beyond all that was the desire of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and his desire was none different from that of Lord Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had predicted that the chanting of Hare Krishna would be known in every town and village of the world. Bhaktivedanta Swami took a taxi down to the Calcutta port. A few friends and admirers, along with his son, Vrindavan, accompanied him. He writes in his diary, "Today at 9 a.m., embarked on MV Jaladuta. Came with me, Bhagwati, the Dwarwan of Scindia Sansir, Mr. Sen Gupta, Mr. Ali, and Vrindavan." He was carrying a Bengali copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which he intended to read during the crossing. Somehow he would be able to cook on board, or if not, he could starve, whatever Krishna desired. He checked his essentials, passenger ticket, passport, visa, P-form, sponsor's address. Finally, it was happening. Srila Prabhupada. With what great difficulty I got out of the country. Some way or other, by Krishna's grace, I got out, so I could spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Otherwise, to remain in India, it was not possible. I wanted to start a movement in India, but I was not at all encouraged. The black cargo ship, small and weathered, was moored at dockside, a gangway leading from the dock to the ship's deck. Indian merchant sailors curiously eyed the elderly saffron-dressed sadhu as he spoke last words to his companions, and then left them and walked determinedly toward the boat. For thousands of years, Krishna Bhakti had been known only in India, not outside, except in twisted, faithless reports by foreigners. And the only swamis to have reached America had been non-devotees, Mayavadi impersonalists. But now, Krishna was sending Bhaktivedanta Swami as his emissary.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Thank you for reading, especially it's nice to hear you reading Radha Priya. Yeah. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna, and to everyone. Sorry, Brandon and Adi Prabhus, we didn't get a chance to hear you read. Sorry, but I think we ended at a nice point, and it was just so nice hearing Radha Priya read that last bit, triumphant,
such a
significant part of the story. So hopefully, maybe next week we'll start with Adi and Brandon if they're here and they want to read. We can start it off.
I'm really sorry. Maybe I read too much. I wasn't quite sure.
What you
really
read?
Sorry.
Amazing. It's just right.
It had to be you reading that bit. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. Thank you. And
I wouldn't have been able to read that bit. I was crying too much.
Yeah, we were doing the same thing.
I was tearing up.
We were doing the same thing. Yeah. I don't know what to say after that. I haven't got anything to say, really.
It's amazing.
I don't know if anyone else has, but it's like,
I mean, how brave, I mean, the courage, because, I mean, me to get on a flight to India 9 hours in that steel thing in the air, I'm like scared every time. Like, I get claustrophobic. I got bad nerves in the airplane. Prabhupada's going to get on a ship. I don't know how long it takes, 4 weeks or something, or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
You've got to go around Calcutta down to Cape Horn and then across the Atlantic, ferocious sea, ocean to cross. I mean, crossing the Atlantic is no joke.
Yeah.
I mean, how brave he was.
If
Incredible.
my memory's right, it's not even a passenger ship that he's on, right?
It's a cargo ship.
Cargo ship. So it's even like the austerity is phenomenal, right? It's not even meant for humans to be on. Really crazy. Yeah. I was wondering if, as we were reading it, almost doesn't seem relevant now, but as we were reading it, all the people like Mr. Bhattacharya and like, did anyone know if Prabhupada met them again? Because they were like really, Prabhupada's like down and out, you know, and they're like the only people out of on the whole planet that cared about him, give him a place to live or help him out a bit. They're like, I wondered if they ever reconnected or something, because that might have, yeah.
Well, if you go to Juhu Temple, Mrs. Maharaji's house is just down the road.
Mm.
So, and she got interviewed, and, you know, he did meet her again, especially, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Well, back to the notes here.
The whole of India knew about Prabhupada when he came back with the first Western disciples. It was big news.
Yeah.
Huge news.
Yeah.
Dancing white elephants.
Yeah. It was huge. It was like a revival of Krishna consciousness in Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta. You know, he did all the big Pandal programs. It was a huge thing.
Great faith in his spiritual master.
That's the point.
And the books, huh? It's nice when it was saying about the books gave him courage.
Yeah, he got courage.
Just because he had the books with him. His far out thing. Yeah.
Prabhupada's practically demonstrating real sannyas. Completely dependent upon Krishna, because that verse in the second canto, what does it say? It says something about, I can't remember exactly, but the conclusion is, conclusion is, won't, you know, the rain falls from the sky, I don't know, the seasons come and go, and most of all, will not Krishna look after his devotees? It's a famous verse. So Prabhupada's just practically demonstrating it. He has no money, and he does everything because Krishna arranges it for him, because he just keeps going and endeavoring. I'm going to find that verse. Yes, it's a practical demonstration of this verse, Prabhupada's, especially this part. Anyone else say anything? Is it time up?
No, I think we're just waiting for that verse. I don't know what else to say.
I was just thinking the bit that got me was when they are just getting the few bits for him, like his clothes. They're getting him some clothes and just preparing. It's just like, it's just such small little things to be doing, and but you know he's about to embark on this huge, you know, adventure. I don't know, that really struck me. I don't know why. I thought, wow, it's like, you know, they're just taking him to get a few small,
like a chudder or something.
Yeah, just a few small bits, and then he's gonna go off.
Like a little boy, you know, like
his little bundle, and it's just, I don't know, it really like hit me.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's almost like they make him a little packed lunch. It didn't say that in there, but like it's just, they send him off his little survival.
Yeah, I wasn't so enthusiastic to read this evening, but by the time that Prabhupada disciples started reading, you know, I just kept thinking, I hope she keeps reading, I hope she keeps reading, I hope she keeps reading. So it was nice to take part. I was just hoping she wouldn't finish, you know.
I was thinking the same thing as well. We got to the end of the chapter, I thought, oh, we have to finish, but yeah. When we can do, amazing reading, very nice to hear. I was thinking the same thing actually. Yeah. Adi, have you had any luck
Nearly there.
Okay.
I got it. Right, listen to this. Are there no torn clothes? It follows on from the verse before about lying on the flat earth when you could. Why need a pillow when you got your arms? Why you need utensils when you got the palms of your hand? Why do you need clothes when there's the skins of trees? And here's the verse. Are there no torn clothes lying on the common road? Do the trees which exist for maintaining others no longer gives alms in charity? Do the rivers being dried up no longer supply water to the thirsty? Are the caves of the mountains now closed? Or above all, does the Almighty Lord not protect the fully surrendered souls? Why then do the learned sages go to flatter those who are intoxicated by hard-earned wealth? There.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Okay. I think time's up.
Yeah.
If everyone's happy.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
happy.
Okay. Thanks for finding that, Adi.
Oh, Brandon's unmuted.
Oh, Brandon's unmuted. Do you want to say something?
I just want to say thank you so much for encouraging us all to read and share so beautifully. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for encouraging us. Yeah, it's so nice to have everyone to do it with. It's really ecstatic. Yeah, it's so nice to hear everyone read and share. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant. So I think next week is on the boat. It's just gonna get better and better, isn't it?
Yeah, we've left it at a really good cliffhanger.
Oh, okay, try not to cheat and read after save it. It's hard not to just jump in and finish it off tonight, but I'll wait. Okay, thanks everybody. Yeah, hope everyone has a nice night and see you soon, maybe on Facebook tomorrow or whatever, anytime. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Evil. Jai Prabhupada.
Back to